I'd like to introduce our first guest on the TherapyStack podcast, Juan Ordoñez. Juan is the co-founder and CEO of mental health startup Allminds. He's a first-generation immigrant from Colombia and has a background in engineering and product design. Juan's a friend of mine from the mental health startup world, and I can personally attest to his passion for making mental health care accessible to communities of color, as demonstrated by his company Allminds, which we will get into during the episode. Juan, how are you doing, man? How is New York treating you?
Hey Faraz, thanks for having me on the podcast. It's an
Of
honor to
course.
be on the very first episode. I'm doing really good, man. How about yourself?
Can't complain. A gloomy day in SF, but getting through it.
Yeah, New York is really warm. I'm not used to it, and I'm definitely missing the nice bay breeze.
Yeah, you know how the summers are here. It's quite freezing for the last 2 months.
Yeah, don't
uh,
take it for granted.
yeah, that's what they say. But okay, Juan, tell me a little bit about your background and what led you into the field of mental health.
Yeah, of course. So I'm originally from Colombia, and I was raised in a very traditional Colombian family. That means our parents were speaking Spanish to us all the time. We're eating Colombian food, watching Colombian shows all the time. And unfortunately, that also meant that we never really spoke about mental health or mental health issues, and not for a lack of mental health issues in our family, because as immigrants, we faced a lot of hardships, and I've come to realize since then that every member of our family has had mental health issues, but it's just something we were not really exposed to, so we never talked about it. And more than that, but we it was kind of like hidden from us as well. Like just the literally the other week, I learned that an extended family member who died several years ago, we had been told had died in an accident, and I just learned that they took their lives away. So it was just
Wow.
it really wasn't talked about. So for most of my adult life, it's something that really wasn't on my radar until I met my wife almost 6 years ago, and
Hmm.
she has been very open about her depression and her anxiety and her family
Hmm.
traumas. And so through her, that was the first time that I really started thinking about my own mental health and the issues around me and my loved ones. And that was a really eye-opening experience for me over the last 6 years. And that is what has really pulled me a lot closer to the space of mental health. And it's made me really passionate about wanting to make mental health care more accessible and also raise awareness on mental health issues in communities of color, because I've since then learned that my situation is quite common,
Yeah.
especially in communities of color. There's a lot of barriers, both cultural and financial, a lot of stigmas that are preventing us from accessing the care that we need.
Yep.
So that's something that I've come to be really passionate about now.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this a decent amount ourselves, but obviously I can relate coming from a Persian kind of immigrant background and hearing the stories of my family. And I've also had similar experiences where we kind of grew up knowing someone as this, and then later in life we find out, oh, there's that was actually a mental health
Yeah.
related thing and that we didn't necessarily talk about. So that's I can totally relate to that. Before kind of like getting into All Minds and then kind of how you moved in that direction. Curious now that you are fully immersed in the mental health space and building in that space. Do you feel like that's had any impact on like the family dynamic and like about mental health and how you guys think about it?
Yes, definitely. I'm really grateful for my parents. They gave me a really good childhood. They were really good parents, and they themselves faced a lot of traumas and a lot of
Hmm.
issues that they weren't equipped to deal with, because if I face stigma and stuff like that, they face that tenfold. And I know, for example, my mother has had a lot of panic attacks all her life,
Hmm.
and I remember hearing stories about them, but they weren't framed as panic attacks. It was just this thing that
Right.
happened and they had no idea why. And
Right.
so now I feel like, having the chance to be more aware of mental health is giving me what I want to do is I want to give back to my family by helping them as, gain that awareness and help grow and, help understand themselves better and just help them get better.
Yep, that's exactly how I feel as well. It's like, when you've spent a lot of time kind of examining yourself and being and like looking at your own mental health, and then you're able to see, positive changes by taking action, and then you see people you love, like your family, kind of going through similar things and maybe not having that realization yet. It's like this urge to help people realize like you don't have to feel this way, and that's kind of the same
Yeah.
urge that drives me to do what I do. So that's really cool to hear. I'd love to maybe switch gears a little bit and talk about Allminds. Obviously, you're in the tech space before, but what is Allminds, and when did you decide to start this business?
Yeah, so with Allminds, we're trying to offer high quality mental health care to communities of color. That's kind of like the core mission of the company. I started working on this shortly after the start of the pandemic. What happened is my wife, had been seeing her therapist in person. And when the pandemic started, she had to quickly switch to virtual therapy. And she was very anxious and upset about it because she was worried like it wasn't going to work and she was going to lose the progress that she had achieved, which had been, really tough to get there.
Mm.
And so I remember her being very anxious about it, but she had no choice. So she started, and fast forward a couple of months, and she was relieved to find out that she had continued to make progress. Her therapeutic alliance was still going on strong. And in fact, she found some unexpected benefits, like she was missing fewer appointments because it was easier to fit in her schedule. She felt like because she wasn't commuting to work either, she was working from home, so she felt in a better headspace as well going into therapy. So it ended up working really well for her. She hasn't gone back to in person since then, 2 years later. But at the time, a couple months in, when I saw this shift in, she was so convinced it was going to go horribly wrong. And when I saw this shift in her mentality, it gave me hope that perhaps teletherapy could be the key to eliminating the barriers that were keeping communities of color from accessing care, or at least play a pivotal role in helping us do that. So and at the same time, because I was working from home too, I had more time. So that's when I started working on the blueprint for Allminds, where I envisioned this, online therapy service that would be high quality, evidence-based, but also culturally competent, and
Right.
offer it to all the communities of color in the US.
Yeah, so I have a question. Before your wife was kind of doing this transition to in-person to remote, did you have any theories or opinions on teletherapy, and was it something you were skeptical of before, and kind of this experience drove you to think it's a real opportunity, or how are you thinking about telemedicine before, and had you had any experience with it?
So I was an outsider.
Mm.
So I had my own, as someone coming from a technology background, I was a big believer in connecting via video. In fact, I've been away from my parents for over a decade, and that's how I keep up with them. It was through video. So like I I was used to connecting with people through video, but I was also very unsure because, I'm not a therapist. And so therapy over video is a completely different thing.
Right.
And a lot of therapists were telling me they were skeptical about being able to create a therapeutic alliance through video.
Hmm.
So I was very, I was very unsure, to be honest. I kind of had a hope that, oh, maybe this could be a cool thing, this could work, but I didn't know. And so I just kind of like observed and listened. And then, when the pandemic started, not only was my wife and other people I talked to that were going to therapy optimistic about it, but also therapists were starting to tell me that they were changing their minds, that this was working really well, that they didn't think their patients were going to go back. So when I started learning that and hearing that directly from therapists, I started growing conviction that teletherapy was here to stay.
Yeah. I mean, I could say for myself, I definitely had a perspective, and I could say I was kind of anti teletherapy initially until I was kind of forced into it during the pandemic. And now it's definitely my preferred method, and for the exact same reasons, not having to get an Uber to go to the therapist office and less chances of missing it. So I'm definitely a believer.
Yeah.
And so about Allminds, like, what's the mission of Allminds, and just tell us a little bit about what it is. What's the product? What do you do?
Yeah, of course. So, as I said before, our mission is to make high quality, evidence-based mental health care accessible to people of color. So, what we're doing is we're building a team of diverse mental health professionals who are trained to provide culturally competent care. They are trained by the head of our clinic, Tangia. She's a Black female licensed clinical social worker who has been in the field for over 20 years. She has started her own group practice with all therapists of color doing exactly the same mission. So she's very passionate about this. And so she is, not only are we hiring diverse therapists, but we're training them as well to give culturally competent care. And what we mean by that is we train our therapists, to incorporate different beliefs and worldviews from different cultures into their therapy, incorporate them into, evidence-based modalities. So we're adapting those modalities to better suit the needs of people of color.
I guess my next question is, like, why people of color? People may say, hey, isn't everyone equal? Why should we focus on people of color? I'm curious how you guys chose to zero in on people of color versus just building a generic platform.
Yeah, so, the name Allminds, it came from, an even higher level mission of, making therapy for all. And the most underserved groups right now in terms of getting mental health care are communities of color. So, for example, 86% of the mental health workforce in the US is white, and 40% of the US population like are people of color. So there's a huge mismatch there. And not only that, but also, traditional, all the studies that have been done in psychology and in mental health have historically been based on predominantly white populations. So as a result, there's just not as much research and resources available for people of color, and it's led to some problems. Like, people of color get misdiagnosed more often than white populations because there's just not as much of an understanding. So I think there's just a bigger problem there. And Allminds has white patients, and we hire white therapists as well. Our makeup right now is 60% are therapists of color and 40% are white. So we are giving therapy to everyone. We're just giving culturally competent care, and we give culturally competent care to white patients as well, because that's their own culture as well.
What's an example of culturally competent care for, like, one specific segment of the population?
Yeah, so just broadly speaking, for example, if a person of color came to therapy and was appearing to be very angry to the therapist and showing, a lot of symptoms that for a white patient might come up as, oh, they're having issues with anger management because they can't control their anger. Well, if it's a person of color, the root of that might not be anger management issues, but it might be that they're struggling from systemic oppression, and something that's just, white people wouldn't be struggling with, but they are. And so if you treat them as a white person, you could misdiagnose them or just give them a kind of intervention modality treatment that is not actually appropriate.
Right. Or even potentially harm them and move them in the wrong direction. Got it. That's very interesting. And I guess other than somebody who is, open to culturally competent care and obviously keeping a decent ratio of actual people of color in your clinic, what do you look for in therapists at Allminds that you hire? And maybe even talk about the structure of what that side of the business looks like.
Yeah, so right now we have 25 clinicians. Like I said earlier, 60% are coming from people of color, 40% are white. They all have experience working with communities of color, even are white therapists.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we have a lot of people who have spent most of their careers working in judicial systems or in prison systems. So even if their own ethnic background doesn't match with their patients, they have a lot of experience working with different kinds of clients. So that's something that we look for, is prior experience with that, and then also a passion for that as well, because we want them to keep learning, and we want them, to learn under Tangia, our clinical director's leadership, and be open to getting trained more and just constantly learning more about each community that we treat.
Very nice. Kind of like cultivating a growth mindset within the clinic and within the culture.
Yeah.
What does a typical week look like for a clinician at Allminds? Like someone who's working there right now, what would a typical week look like?
Yeah, so it varies a lot for each provider. We're giving providers a lot of flexibility. So, we have some providers who might only want to see 5 patients per week, and others who want to see 20 clients per week. So we support you in however you want to work as a therapist. We are fully virtual, so everyone is spread all over the state. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to foster a tightly knit community despite that. So
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing, for example, shortly, is we are hosting Zoom sessions between the clinicians,
Ah.
and where they can exchange tips. For example, our clinicians do consultations with incoming clients, and some of our clinicians are really experienced at that. They've been
Mm.
doing it in private practice for many years, and others, it's their first time, and they, a little bit anxious about having to, pitch themselves, or they
Close the
struggle,
deal.
yeah, closing the deal, or just they also struggle, like their consultations end up going for 30 minutes and
Mm.
stuff like that, or they because they want to be empathetic, so they struggle keeping it to 15 minutes and keeping it also non-therapeutic,
Mm.
because a consultation shouldn't be a therapy session.
Yep.
So we connect the therapists with each other to get feedback from each other and learn from each other. That's something we're doing. We are also, Tangia is also hosting, one-on-one sessions with anyone that might be interested, who needs extra clinical support, who wants to talk about their clients. We offer that as well. And yeah, but so everyone is kind of in control of their workload. We have a personal relationship with every single individual provider, because at this scale we can do that. So I think that's something that I really enjoy, is I've gotten to know every provider at a personal level. And that's something quite unique, is it also gives them an opportunity to actually shape what the company is, how the company is growing, shape how our platform is growing. It's all being built from the direct feedback that we are getting from our providers. I try to speak with each one of them every 2 weeks for like a 30-minute, sometimes an hour phone call. So yeah, it kind of has a little bit of a startup vibe, but in a clinic.
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
curious on that note, like, therapists most often haven't been part of a startup or even like a corporation for that matter. I'm curious, like, what's the reaction of the clinicians at Allminds so far? I assume some of them have not worked in a setting like this before. How are they feeling about it? What do they like? What do they not like?
So it was a long wait for us to get up and running. We initially recruited our therapist in January and of 2022, and then we opened shop just now in July. So it was a really long wait. So for a long time, people were like, "Oh, is this actually going to happen?" Stuff like that. But now that we've launched, everyone is really, really excited. Everyone has started getting consultations. People have started seeing clients as well. And yeah, people are reaching out proactively with ideas. Some have indicated interest in also, wanting to get more involved with the company. So not just do therapy, but potentially find other roles within the company. So I think that's something that we're looking for, is kind of like people that would be excited about joining a company at this early stage, and who would want to uh, give their input and actually help us build this company.
Help shape what All Minds
Hmm.
becomes. That's very
Yeah,
cool.
and because a lot of them have prior experience working for other telehealth platforms, And so a lot of them have had bad experiences or good experiences, and they're bringing a lot of interesting experiences and opinions, and they are excited to be like, okay, like we know what we like about the others, what we don't like, and now we can kind of like build our own. That's a mentality that I've seen across all of them, and it's particularly exciting to me.
That's really cool. I love that.
Mhm.
What would you say if you had to choose one thing? I'm already picking up on a few, but what would you say All Minds does differently than other mental health startups or clinics if you had to choose one thing that makes it unique from other organizations?
Yeah, so different than other, teletherapy startups is I am a huge believer in putting clinicians in leadership positions
Hmm.
for a company in the space. So the clinic is run by Tan, and it's entirely run by her. So she has full say on anything that's clinical. She has 100% the lead on that. We never like even suggest or interfere with that.
Yep.
Rather, and Tangia she had this vision prior to even meeting us. She had this vision with her own clinic to build a nationwide culturally competent mental health care
Ah,
provider service. And so the way I see it is I and Allminds is just supporting her and empowering her to achieve that vision with, technology and infrastructure. And so that's something that I think is a very something very unique about our team. And then we are also it's not just Tangia, we're going even beyond that. So we just hired a psychologist from Cornell, has a lot of experience in academic research, in designing evidence-based programs, training clinicians.
mm,
So she is joining Allminds as head of clinical strategy, just, as the to help us get to the next level and start innovating as well in how mental health care can be delivered using technology virtually and stuff like that.
that is very cool. So let me know if I'm understanding you correctly. Basically, you're bringing on a clinician that has experience in researching clinical methods of dealing with things specific to people of color. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so all of her thesis and academic background was in working in 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 prison systems and mental health care in prison systems.
Got it.
So she's bringing that experience, and she has experience developing new evidence-based programs.
Got it.
So like I mentioned before, a lot of the studies and modalities that have been developed have been based on wide populations. So
Mm,
they've been very general. So there's fewer research and studies on how these modalities work in communities of color. So what we want to do is with Almonds is we want to add to that knowledge base. So we want to develop, for example, a CBT but tailored to communities of color. And we can go
mm.
even more specific. So for each, for example, like a CBT tailored for Black people or the Latinx community, that's kind of what we want to do.
That is very, very cool. What resources and services do you give to therapists at All Minds? Like, what all is included in being a clinician at All Minds?
Gotcha. So we've built a platform and suite of tools to facilitate therapy end to end and support and empower both patients and therapists. So the our goal is that a therapist should come to Almonds and be able to only focus on seeing their client and helping their client and doing their therapy and nothing else. So we've streamlined a lot of the admin work that goes with running a practice. So that means, we are getting referrals for a therapist and matching them with the right provider so that when they get a consultation, it's a pre-screened patient that is likely to fit their style. And then we provide them the tools to do the consultation. We provide them the tools for scheduling. So clients actually, the availability of our providers is linked to our platform. So when a client books a slot with them, it's a slot that already, is going to work for the provider. They don't have to deal with the hassle of trying to reschedule.
Yep.
And if they wanted to do that, like they can do it easily via the platform. And then We have, the templates for the notes with guides and training on how to complete the notes. So very quickly after each session, you can conveniently submit your note. We are working on accepting insurance, and when we do, we will take care of all the billing and claim submission. So our therapists will just get a paycheck every 2 weeks for every session that they've done, regardless of where the claim status is at. Regardless, even if the claim ends up getting rejected, we'll cover for that pay. So really the goal is for therapists to be able to only focus on therapy, and which is what they love doing, and not have to do marketing, billing, admin stuff and anything like that. So that's kind of like the platform aspect of it. Then, like I mentioned before, we're trying to build a community and also offer supervision. So Tangia is always available to offer clinical support for that. And then you mentioned pay, and pay is extremely important. So we believe that, therapists need to be paid really well. It's a really tough job. Yeah. It's a really taxing job, and it's a highly skilled and specialized job as well. So they deserve to be paid really well. Right. So we we have rates that are, from what I've heard, much above average the other teletherapy companies, and above average in other clinics as well. Being fully virtual, we have less overhead, so we don't have to take as big of a cut as we do from each session. And that's our business model. It's pretty straightforward and transparent. Is each session that happens on Allminds, we take a cut of it, and the vast majority of it goes to the therapist. We are in late stage, conversations with all major insurance payers to start accepting them. I think we'll be able to start accepting the first insurance clients from one of the payers in as little as a month from now on. So we're really excited about that, because that's going to expand, access to our services.
And does the therapist need to be paneled prior to joining Allminds, or is that something that Allminds does or is included with Allminds?
So we will panel you with Allminds, with the payers that we get, and we'll take care of the entire process. So it should be fairly hassle-free for the therapists. We're looking to offer a lot of support for continuing education. So we already have a 5-hour course on cultural competency that you can get accredited for, that we will cover as well. So we're just getting started with that. We're just at the initial stages of kind of planning that out, but we're excited about continuing to offer that and expanding on that as we.
I'm curious, what's the next big milestone for Allminds?
So right now we are fully focused on getting insurance up and running. When we do, we are expecting a huge influx of clients and referrals coming in from insurance companies, because the demand is ridiculous right now. So very soon, it could be as little as a month from this time that we're recording, we are going to need more clinicians. So that will be the next phase, maybe like starting fall. We're going to have to expand rapidly to meet that demand, and that will come with another set of challenges onto, being able to, despite growing, keep recruiting excellent people. So keep screening for really good therapists and keep providing the same level of support and training that we are able to right now. So that will kind of be the next challenge, is how can we scale this really great and promising organization that we've built with 25 clinicians to a larger statewide organization, and then in the future nationwide as well.
That's perfect. That answered my next question, which was if someone listening wants to work at Allminds, are you guys hiring, and what does that look like? Sounds like come fall there's going to be some new job postings up. Is that right?
Yeah, we are already taking resumes and talking with people who are interested. So I would say, if you're interested, definitely reach out now. There's no need to wait. We are meeting with people and getting to know people, because right now we are setting the bar high for clinicians, because we think that's really important to provide high quality care, is having really good therapists. And that's why we pay them really well, invest a lot in their training and support them really well, is because we're hiring really good people. So it can be an ongoing conversation. It's a very personal process. So you meet with Tangia, who has decades of experience and has met many providers. So you start just talking with her. We start talking about the mission, about the company, about your background, and if it's a fit, we'll bring you on.
That's awesome. And where can people go to learn more about you, contact you, and just learn more about Allminds?
So anyone can go on our website, getallminds.com, to learn more about the company and kind of see a little bit more, learn more about the background of Tangia and what we're trying to do. And then you can reach out to us via hello@allminds.io. The email should be in the website as well. We don't have any job postings up right now, but we are looking for people. So just shoot us an email. Let us know that you're interested, and we would love to meet you.
All right. You heard it here first. Thank you so much, Juan. It was amazing having you on, being the first podcast guest, and I'm really excited for what Allminds is going to do. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.